Hey everyone, Rob B here with Rob D, and you are listening to the Property Podcast, and it's market update time. We've got some really interesting stories coming up for you. Yes, we cover the boom in the media. It's finally getting coverage, but importantly, we also look at how long it will continue for. We get some interesting news on activity in city centres, and we find out what the Queen has got to say about property.
Welcome to the Property Podcast, where every Thursday morning property investors come to be informed and inspired. Yes, it's that time again. We're bringing you another market update. Over the next 15-20 minutes, you're going to learn everything you need to know about what's been going on in property to save you a lot of time. And if you stick around to the end for Hub Extra, we've got a resource that will save you time in other areas of your life as well.
We're giving you a bit extra early on today. That's because we've got a new YouTube video out. We've had a little time off recently of producing YouTube videos on the Property Hub YouTube channel. But don't worry, we're back on track and you're going to see lots more coming through. We've got a really strong one for you to watch. It's 5 underrated property investment areas. There's going to be a couple in there that I'm sure are going to surprise you. It's getting some great comments already. If you haven't checked out our YouTube channel yet, please get over there, subscribe and like. We're trying to give you as much value over on the YouTube channel as we do on the podcast. So search for Property Hub UK on YouTube, subscribe, and so you don't miss any, hit that notification bell as well. If you're listening to this on your phone, you'll be able to access it right now as you listen along. So head over to YouTube, get the video open and ready to watch, and make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more.
Right, let's get into our market update for this month then. Like Rob said earlier, we're going to be talking about the Queen's speech and the policies that the government are putting forward for the coming year. We're going to be talking about rents, but as is traditional for market updates, we've got to start, Rob, with house prices.
Boom in Eck, Rob. We are in a boom, apparently. Not that we've been saying it for a little while, but at last the media is catching on. And recently it made front page news of the Daily Express. But we've not taken the Express story here. We have gone to the Mortgage Strategy website, which is actually quite a good resource for property news. And the headline of this particular story reads, "House prices continue upward, trend rising 10% in March." Now that sounds a bit misleading because it sounds like it's gone up just 10% in March. That's not true. But it's gone up 10% since March last year, which is still huge growth. Rob, for listeners to the Property Podcast, this won't be news, but it may be news to people seeing these headlines for the first time. It's the early signs that the media is starting to pay attention to this.
Yeah, you can't really ignore 10% growth, can you? Or you've actually undersold it. It's 10.2%, which is the highest annual growth rate since August 2007. It's a proper boom time then. I mean, like that was pretty much the peak of what was going on then. And now we've got it again. Regional variation in there, of course. And the form of that regional variation will not come as any surprise to podcast listeners. Can you take a guess as to what's bringing up the rear? Yes, it's London. Lowest growth for the 4th consecutive month at 3.7%. And the highest growth, Yorkshire and the Humber, putting on growth of 14%, which is just crazy. It's unbelievable. And we'll come on to a story about how long this boom will last for. But the fact that a boom is underway is undeniable at this point.
Yeah, it's unquestionable. And some people have been asking me, will this end when furlough ends and stamp duty ends? And, well, we don't think so. And you can listen to our episode on the property boom that we've recorded recently on the Property Podcast. Or you could just read the article that we have next in The Guardian, which says Nationwide predicts UK house prices will continue to rise.
Yeah, this is significant because for the last however long it is that house prices have been unexpectedly strong. Whenever Nationwide puts out its monthly data, there's always a quote from them saying, but, this is only temporary, but we don't think this is going to last, but we need to be aware of all these headwinds, etc., etc. It's always very heavily caveated, and Halifax have done the same. This is the first month when Nationwide has not come out and said that, and they've said that they believe that prices will continue to rise. And to quote the article, it says the surge in home buying and house prices is likely to continue after government incentives such as the stamp duty holiday are wound down. So like you were saying, Rob, there's all this debate about, will it continue after this, after that? And now they're saying that it will. And the chief executive of Nationwide, the quote is, a little bit surprised by how strong the housing market has been. Well, you should listen to the podcast.
Indeed. It's good advice for everyone. Listen to the podcast. Now, to be honest, Rob, I'm a little bit surprised to see this next news story. And it's from Rightmove, their press centre. And the headline reads, first-time buyer demand and stalled price growth help city centres bounce back. Now, we expected this to happen, but I'm surprised it's happening already.
Yes, so Rightmove data, they're often using their own data about demand, inquiries, activity levels, things like that. So they often see things first. And obviously, that's not necessarily going to translate through to transactions, prices, whatever. But it does mean that you get early indications. And what they've noticed is that flats have seen the biggest jump in buyer demand since January, up by 39%. And city centre demand is up by more than demand for villages. And the biggest jumps have been in York, Norwich and Sheffield. And yes, this is really interesting, Rob, because we did an episode on city centres. The episode was called something like, is it all over for investing in city centres? And the conclusion of that was basically that no, city centres will be fine. It's not going to be quite the same as before, but city centres are still going to be places that are in high demand. And there's possibly a window of opportunity to get into those cities while everyone else is buying into the narrative that it's all over and they should be looking elsewhere. And this data, although it is early, suggests that that window might be starting to close.
While it's nice to be right, it's also, I feel, conflicted because I wanted this window to last longer, because it feels great when you can sense an opportunity that others aren't quite seeing yet. And it's a shame that it's already closing that window. It's only the start, so there's plenty of opportunity left. But it's amazing how strong this market is, that the area of opportunity, what seemed to be the only area of opportunity left while everything else was booming, city centres, is already getting that reverse ripple back. The boom elsewhere is rippling back into city centres because people are going, oh, wait a minute, there's value there. So we'll see. We'll see how quickly this happens. It could take a while for them to bounce back, so the opportunity could be extended. So the best opportunity was probably doing a deal last week, but there's still plenty of weeks left to take advantage of this because, let's face it, while people are starting to wake up to the opportunity that exists here, it's going to take a while for everybody to wake up to this. Just like it's taken people a while, and it's still far from widely acknowledged that we're in a property boom right now. We've talked about a piece in The Guardian, a piece in The Express, and some niche property news websites that are covering it. It's far from mainstream national press, and that's probably because they've got a lot on their plate at the moment, and there's lots that they can talk about other than property. But like you said earlier on in the show, Rob, it is hard to ignore double-digit growth, and I can't see it lasting for that much longer. And that will obviously then wake people up to city centres even more so when that happens. So we'll see. But what else is nice to see, Rob, is the places that we picked at the beginning of the year as our safe bets to invest in this year seem to be doing quite well. And they were seemingly safe bets.
Yeah, what a great day. The sun is shining. I've got a nice coffee in front of me and there's another news story proving us right. How much better can things get?
Who picks these news stories, Rob?
I don't know who chose these. It's just crazy. This is from Home Track. They've put their house price index out for April. I know that we're in June now, but this data is always lagging. So this came out at the end of May. And this is where they look at house price growth in 20 cities across the UK. The top four at the moment in order are Liverpool, Manchester, Nottingham and Leeds. And those were, I am not too modest to remind everyone, the exact four safe bets that we picked as our investment locations for 2021. Sheffield, which we tipped as a one to watch, is in fifth. So doing pretty well there. Broadening it out a bit to be about something other than us being right, because probably shouldn't get too ahead of ourselves as we're not even halfway through the year yet. Also in this report, they're talking about sales volumes, and they reckon that we're on track for the biggest year in terms of volume of sales for over a decade. So another indication there of just how mad the market is at the moment.
It is, but it's not just house prices on the up at the moment. It seems rents are moving upwards. Well, if you exclude London. So the Home Track rental report that's come out recently says that average rents across the UK outside of London rose by 1% in the 3 months up to the end of March, taking annual rental growth up by 3%. So that's an increase from the 2.1% growth at the end of Q4 2020. And marks the highest level of rental growth in 4.5 years. Well, that's pretty staggering. And everywhere, as we said, is doing really well, Rob. Lots of places growing. except the one big exception, and it is a big exception, which is London.
Yeah, the only positive spin you can find for London is it's less bad than it was, slightly, but it's still really bad. Rents are down 9.4% in the year to March, which is no longer double digit because it was down 10% in the year to February, which means that rents are picking up slightly. But yeah, still not happy days in London. However, remember that story earlier about city centres coming back. If buyer activity is coming back in city centres as a result of people getting back to work and all that kind of thing, then you would expect that rents will follow. So I'm not going to say it's suddenly going to snap back to exactly where it was, because I think they're probably a bit pricey beforehand, and I do think that working patterns have changed. But I think that will probably continue to improve over the rest of the year. We'll see. But rental growth elsewhere, like you said, is strong, and strongest in areas where there is the most affordability. And that pattern is strong because London was the least affordable, and therefore rents have suffered the most and are struggling to come back. Rents in places like the Northwest were relatively affordable and are therefore performing strongly. And the Northeast has got the best affordability in the country. And it's also where rents are growing the most, up 5.5%. And this is something you see with prices as well. As cycles go along, you'll get markets that move at different paces, either are lagging too far back or get too far ahead, and they come closer back into alignment. And that seems to be what's happening now.
Staying with rents, or the lack of, we've got some really interesting data on rental arrears from a PropTech report. This report we've quoted from before. It's really, really good. We'll link to it, of course, in the show notes so you can have a read for yourself. But the overall headline of the data is that the number of tenants in arrears is down from a high of 13.4% down to 11.4%, which actually is a significant movement. That's quite a lot. And for those who don't remember, the North East had highs in 2020 of 25% of tenants in arrears. But now it's improved and it's 21.28%. It's great that it's going in the right direction, and it's great for all sides. It means tenants are getting themselves in a better economic position, and therefore, landlords are actually bringing in some rent and not just costs going out the door. But wow, Rob, that's still, for all the positivity around this news, and we must take it as a positive trend because it is one, but I still can't get over that 21% of properties in the Northeast are in arrears.
That's crazy, isn't it? We've thrown around a lot of big numbers on this podcast so far, but that's actually the one that surprises me the most. Still can't believe it. So as of the 1st of June, the evictions ban is over. Bailiffs can enforce evictions again, and the amount of notice that you need to give a tenant in order to ask them to leave has gone down. It's now down to 4 months. So it used to be 2 months. As soon as the pandemic hit, it was increased to 6 months, and now it's been back down to 4. And then the idea is, all being well, I think it's October, it will go back down to 2 months again. So it's still not a quick process to regain possession, but better than it was. And the rules are slightly different in the different countries of the UK. Rather than running through them all down, we will link to this article in the show notes so you can go and see what the position is in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland for yourself.
A quick note on the Queen's speech recently. Didn't she do a good job? No, not her delivery, but actually the content around property. We mentioned this on one of our news stories in the last few weeks. And just a note to remind you of what's been said, but also to say not much has happened since. So the notable things for those interested in property is that ground rents are going to be ending, which I think is very welcome from everybody who has to pay them. There's going to be a new building safety regulator. Details of that still to be revealed, and we can't really say more than there will be a new one. And further planning reform. It's been a lot over the last few years, but it aims to simplify it and speed up the planning process, and that really does need to happen. I've heard that before, but it's still a chore. But they're also going to make it harder for homeowners to block new housing schemes. We'll see if that's going to be a popular move. But Rob, as you can expect, lots of announcements from the government, but still a bit lacking on the detail.
Yeah, call me a skeptic, but I've heard lots of things about planning reform and how it's going to unlock the ability to build hundreds of thousands of new houses before, and it's never quite happened that way, but maybe it's going to be different this time. We'll see. The leasehold reform that you mentioned, though, that is a big deal. That's going to be significant. We've known this is coming for a couple of years, and now they've said that it will come forward in this session. We should start seeing some more of the detail around that soon, which is going to be good. And then the other really big thing, probably the biggest for property investors in the Queen's speech, was something else that we've known is coming for a while, which is the end of Section 21 evictions. As yet, still no more detail than what we already knew before, which is that Section 21, i.e. the ability to ask a tenant to leave for no reason, effectively, is going away. And as a balance to that, the government has said that they're going to strengthen the Section 8 route, which means if you want a property back to sell it or move into or something like that, you'll still be able to. The main bugbear around this has always been that a large part of the time, the reason that people use Section 21 is that it's quicker. So even if you do have something like rent arrears, it's just easier to use that method and then write off the arrears than it is to actually go through the whole process of trying to evict on the basis of the arrears. So you would hope that as part of these reforms, they'll be streamlining Section 8, maybe putting some accelerated procedures in there, maybe putting more resources into the courts so you don't have the huge backlog that you always have at the moment. Will those things end up happening? I don't know. But this is something that has been hanging for a couple of years now. And at least now it's actually happening. We can have some of these things debated in Parliament and then have an idea of where we're going to end up and how we need to adapt to it. So it's going to be a very busy session of Parliament. So there's loads in there just on the property side, and property is only a tiny part of what the government is trying to deal with at the moment. So plenty to keep tabs on in future market updates.
So it's time for Hub Extra, where we just want to bring you a little bit more. And this is all backed up by the Hub Extra email that goes out each and every Friday. You can get your hands on that wonderful electronic copy by signing up to the Property Hub website. And if you haven't done that already, are you mad? It's absolutely free to do. You get access to all the courses, the forum, loads and loads of good stuff. So make sure you do. And of course, you get the Hub Extra email. Hub Extra this week is Blinkist. Now, Blinkist is really, really interesting to me. First of all, I just want to say I've not used it. And it was producer Dan who put this one back in front of us. I've been aware of Blinkist for a long time now. Basically what it is an app that takes popular books and will then condense down the core lessons. Rob and I are often frustrated by when we pick up a book that has maybe 10% really good stuff and 90% filler. And unfortunately, there seems to be a lot of books like that. They should have just been a long blog post rather than a book. But you can understand why they do it. Blinkist gets around that. It just takes the 10%. Now, I do want to say I've heard mixed things on Blinkist. Some people love it, some people don't, and some people argue that actually, even though a book sometimes really drags out a point because you've had to read it so many times in such a long format, that actually it helps you retain it a little bit more. I haven't seen any scientific documents to back that up, but I can see logic in the theory. So one to check out, not a wholehearted endorsement, but the concept of it is very interesting and does appear to save you time, which, let's face it, we could all do with more of. So check it out, Blinkist, and decide for yourself if it's one for you.
Well, that's it. Another month in property rounded up. Now you are fully informed about what's been going on over the last 4 and a bit weeks. And we'll be doing it all again in another month's time. But you don't have to wait that long for another podcast because we do it every week. In fact, we've got 2 podcasts every single week. The property podcast will be back on Thursday. But before that, we'll be answering 2 more of your questions in Ask Rob and Rob on Tuesday. So until we see you then, have a great week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.